You've probably heard their name before. The Knights Templar. White cloaks, red crosses, sword in one hand, faith in the other. But behind the legend of the warrior monks lies a lesser-known truth. These men weren't just knights. They were builders, diplomats, and surprisingly, they were also some of the most advanced financial minds of the Middle Ages. In fact, many historians now agree that the Templars created one of the first international banking systems in human history. But how did a group of religious warriors evolve into something that resembled a medieval bank? And why did their power spark fear in the hearts of kings and popes alike? This is the story of how the Knights Templar changed the world not just with swords, but with paper, promises, and gold. The year is 1119. In the aftermath of the First Crusade, the Christian kingdoms of Europe have established new strongholds in the Holy Land. But the roads to Jerusalem are dangerous. Bandits prey on pilgrims, and travelers risk their lives with every journey. A small group of knights, just 9 men, form a brotherhood to protect Christian pilgrims. They call themselves the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. But over time, they will become known by a much shorter name: the Knights Templar. At first, they are humble. They take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. They own no lands. They ride 2 to a horse. But their dedication earns them powerful allies. The Church gives them its blessing. The Pope grants them special privileges, freedom from local laws, exemption from taxes, and the right to move freely across borders. With that, the Templars become an independent force answerable only to the Pope himself. As the Crusades continue, the Templar order grows rapidly. Wealthy nobles donate land and money. The order begins building castles, managing estates, and developing a network of outposts stretching from England to the Holy Land. But they do more than fight. They learn to manage property, to collect rents, to track resources. Slowly, a new role begins to emerge. Administrators, not just warriors. And then something remarkable happens. The Templars begin offering a service to travelers: financial protection. Imagine this. You are a nobleman in France preparing to visit Jerusalem. You leave your money with the Templars in Paris. In return, you receive a document, a letter of credit. When you arrive in the Holy Land, you hand it to another Templar outpost and receive your money back. No gold had to travel with you. No risk of theft. It's simple, secure, and revolutionary. Over time, this system becomes more refined. The Templars develop codes to protect transactions. Their outposts act like branches of a modern bank. Deposits, withdrawals, loans, all managed across thousands of miles. They begin holding money for nobles, kings, even the church itself. Their financial services are fast, reliable, and trusted. By the 13th century, the Knights Templar are not just a religious order, they are the closest thing the medieval world has to a banking institution. They offer safekeeping, credit, loans, and even investment opportunities. Some historians believe that the Templars created the early foundations for what would eventually become modern banking. And their temple in Paris? It functioned almost like a central bank for all of Europe. At the height of their influence, the Knights Templar controlled over 1,000 properties across Europe and the Middle East. Their network of castles, farms, vineyards, and fortresses stretched from Scotland to Jerusalem. In each location, a local preceptor, something like a branch manager, oversaw the order's finances, supplies, and security. These centers not only helped fund the Crusades, but also turned profits that went back into the order's reserves. Their structure was lean, disciplined, and surprisingly modern. They kept detailed records. They employed scribes, treasurers, and accountants. Their letters of credit worked across borders and languages. They were written in a way that only Templars could interpret, using coded scripts and seals to verify authenticity. Some documents even show early examples of compound interest and financial risk assessments. By this point, the Templars weren't just protecting pilgrims, they were managing massive wealth. And that made them useful. monarchs across Europe began turning to the Templars for one reason: they needed money. War is expensive, so is diplomacy, and kings, as powerful as they seemed, often lacked liquid wealth. The Templars, on the other hand, had both cash and the infrastructure to move it safely. So kings began depositing their treasure with the order. Some even borrowed from them directly. In England, the Templars stored royal jewels. In France, they managed taxation for the crown. And in Portugal, they helped finance military campaigns. With this level of trust, the Templars had become more than just allies, they were bankers to monarchs. But here's the thing about lending money to a king. When they can't repay it, the consequences can be dangerous. As the 14th century approached, the political landscape of Europe began to shift. The Crusades had lost their momentum. Christian kingdoms were growing weaker in the Holy Land. And with no major battles to fight, the usefulness of the Templars as warriors began to fade. But their financial power, that was still growing. They owned prime real estate, controlled supply routes, managed millions in assets by today's standards. For some rulers, this wealth was intimidating, especially for one man in particular, King Philip IV of France. Philip IV had borrowed heavily from the Templars to fund his military campaigns and administrative reforms. But he was also facing a financial crisis. France was in debt, and the king's treasury was nearly empty. At the same time, Philip began to view the Templars as a threat, not just because of their influence, but because of their independence. They answered to no crown, no local law, not even the King of France. That kind of autonomy was rare and dangerous in the eyes of a monarch trying to centralize power. And so a decision was made, one that would reshape history and bring the most powerful order in medieval Europe to a sudden and shocking end. The year was 1307. On the 13th of October, a Friday, King Philip IV of France initiated a coordinated operation across his kingdom. At dawn, hundreds of Knights Templar were arrested. They were accused of serious crimes, secret rituals, denial of faith, and misconduct. But many historians believe these charges were politically motivated, a cover for something much simpler: power and money. The Templars were wealthy, autonomous, and most importantly, deeply in debt to the crown. Removing them would erase the debt and transfer their wealth directly into royal hands. And so began one of the most dramatic takedowns of an organization in medieval history. After the arrests came the trials. Under pressure from the French crown, the church launched official investigations. Many knights, held for weeks or months, confessed to the charges but under extreme conditions. Later, several would retract their confessions, claiming they were made out of fear and fatigue. Public opinion was divided. Some believed the Templars had truly fallen into corruption. Others saw the accusations as manufactured an excuse to seize land, assets, and authority. In 1312, the Pope officially disbanded the order. Some members were absorbed into other military or religious groups. Others faded into quiet exile. And the last Grand Master of the Templars, Jacques de Molay, was sentenced to death. According to legend, his final words warned that justice would come to those who betrayed the order. But there's one question that has never been fully answered. What happened to the Templar fortune? When royal forces raided the Templar headquarters in Paris, they expected to find vaults filled with treasure. But the gold was gone. No scrolls, no currency, no jewels. Some believe the Templars were warned in advance and moved their wealth before the arrest began. Others suggest it was distributed across the network, hidden in outposts across Europe and the Middle East. And then there are those who think the treasure was never in physical form, that it had already evolved into assets, credits, and land holdings that couldn't simply be seized overnight. The order was gone, but its influence lingered. Their system of letters of credit, property management, and secure transport would inspire future generations. Centuries later, bankers and economists would look back at Templar records and recognize the early patterns of a modern financial system. And beyond economics, their name lived on in legends, novels, and films, often portrayed as guardians of powerful secrets or hidden knowledge. Whether those myths are rooted in truth or fantasy, one thing is certain. The Knights Templar left a legacy that stretched far beyond the battlefield. They changed how money moved, how empires grew, and how power was protected. Though the Order of the Knights Templar was dissolved, their ideas didn't vanish. Their innovations in finance, from secured letters of credit to international transfers, laid the foundation for systems that would be refined in the centuries that followed. In Renaissance Italy, the Medici banks built on these concepts. Later, banking houses in Amsterdam, London, and Paris would develop financial instruments that echoed Templar models. The idea of a trusted institution moving money securely across borders? That was their invention. Their presence across nations, loyalty only to a central authority, and record-keeping practices? Those concepts helped shape what we now call multinational banking. Over time, the fall of the Templars gave rise to mystery. Were they hiding secret knowledge? Did they carry sacred relics to safety? Were they connected to later groups like the Freemasons or involved in coded messages passed down through history? These questions have filled books, inspired films, and launched entire genres of speculation. The truth is, we may never know the full story. But the real power of the Templars isn't found in secret vaults or buried treasure. It's found in the systems they left behind and how we think about credit, security, and trust. In the end, the Knights Templar were more than just soldiers of faith. They were organizers, innovators, builders of a network that connected empires. Their downfall reminds us how quickly power can shift. But their legacy shows us how ideas can survive long after their creators are gone. Today, when you use a card, send a wire transfer, or walk into a bank in another country, you're stepping into a world they helped design nearly 1,000 years ago. And somewhere in the shadows of history, the story of the Templars still echoes in stone, in scrolls, and in the silent movement of money across the world. This has been the hidden history of the Knights Templar. Not just warriors, not just monks, but the original bankers of Europe. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more hidden history. Because sometimes, the truth is stranger than legend.